In this video, I'm going to go over some of the main structures of DNA molecules, showing different models of what those structures could look like. So one of the first things you need to know where to find on a DNA molecule is the phosphates and the sugars. Now remember, they alternate up and down the sides of the molecule. So the phosphates are always going to be usually represented as these round structures. On this guy, it's got a P for phosphate, so that's helpful. But on this one on the right, the phosphates are these green round ones. And on the one down in the bottom left, the phosphates are the round ones here on either side. And then on this final one, the phosphates aren't drawn as a round molecule. They're just drawn as a actual diagram of the atoms. And so each of these would be the phosphates. The easier one to find, in my opinion, is the sugar, because remember the phosphates and the sugars alternate down the sides, and the sugars are almost always shown as these pentagons. So there in that model, the orange ones in this model, these little guys in that model, and in the final model, those. So again, to find the phosphates and sugars, they alternate down the sides of the molecule. The sugars are almost always the pentagon-shaped ones, and the phosphates are often represented as circles. The next thing that's in that same area that you need to be able to identify is the covalent bonds. Now, the covalent bonds are going to be always between the phosphates and the sugars. So you can see it up here on this other one. Let's see, let's go in this area right here. Oh, that's too dark, but let's go back and see if we can take a look at that with a little bit smaller, more specific area. See this line right here that connects the phosphate and the sugar? That is the covalent bond in here, in here. So that's the strong bond that never gets broken. On this model, the covalent bonds are represented here between the phosphates and the sugars. On this model, the covalent bonds are all these lines down the side between the phosphates and the sugars. And then finally on this model, again, the connections between the phosphates and the sugars are the covalent bonds. The other type of bond you need to know is a hydrogen bond. Hydrogen bonds are between the bases of a nucleotide. So they're always the lines that attach the A's and T's and the G's and the C's. So in this model, they're between them here. Here they are in the second model. Again, these are the hydrogen bonds. Here they are in this model. And finally, the last model. They're often shown as dotted lines or dashed lines because they are weaker bonds that are easier to break. Okay, the next thing you'll need to do is to be able to circle a nucleotide. A nucleotide always has three parts: a sugar, which you know where that is now, a phosphate, which you know where that is, and a base. The bases are the A's, the T's, the G's, and the C's in the middle. So if we take this top left model again, the phosphate, which is attached to a sugar, which is attached to one base, would be a nucleotide right there. On this side, our nucleotide would be one phosphate, one sugar, one base over there. The model on the right upper hand corner, one phosphate, one sugar, one base would be here, or one phosphate, one sugar, one base there. Again, that's called the nucleotide. Bottom left model, one phosphate, one sugar, one base. And the bottom right model, one phosphate, one sugar, one base. Always the definition of a nucleotide. So if you know where your phosphates and sugars and bases are, then you can always circle a nucleotide. Just make sure there's only one of each in them. The last thing you're required to know is which bases pair with each other. And you'll notice in each of these, A's and T's, or T's and A's, always pair together. So you're always going to match A with a T or T with an A. And the G's and C's and C's and G's always pair together. So when you're filling in bases, if you're given an A, you know a T has to be across from it. If you're given a T, an A has to be across from it. Same with the C's and G's. If you're given a C, a G has to be across from it. If you're given a G, the C has to be across from it. So no matter what type of model you see I hope that you can now feel like you can pick out the particular structures based on some commonalities.